your screen there that the record button has been turned on and has started. Still got some folks coming in. Welcome to those of you that just jumped in. Give it just another couple minutes. Hey, Margie.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I saw you just jumped in. Got some other folks coming in, y'all. We'll get started in about 1 more minute. All right, guys, we are about almost 4 minutes past the hour, so we can go ahead and get going. I know that a couple of other folks will likely be joining us and jumping in the next couple of minutes. But for time's sake and trying to be mindful of our agenda today, I want to go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for joining us. My name is Erica Atzenhofer. If I have not had the pleasure of meeting you, I'm so grateful to see so many of you on today, and I know that we have a lot to get through. So I'm happy to go ahead and kind of get us going. I'm the Human Trafficking Unit Supervisor here at the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, and I have several CJCC folks on with me as well. Much of my team is actually out, but Lindsay Cheatham, who is our statewide victim advocate, is on with us today, and she's going to be assisting with monitoring the chat. I do ask that you guys please maintain your mute buttons as well as staying mindful of your cameras. If you are moving around, if you're traveling, we understand that a lot of times it's easy to join by phone, but sometimes that can be a distraction to other folks that are sitting at their desk or their offices. So please just try to stay mindful of those mute buttons and your cameras to try to kind of cut down on any interruption. I also just want to quickly thank CJCC leadership. I know that Christy Carter is on today, our division director. Thank you, Christy. And I'm not sure if our executive director, Jay Neal, is on at this time. He might be joining us a little bit later, but just want to recognize some of our leadership team and thank them for being here as well. This is our last and final quarterly meeting of the 2023 Task Force year. For those of you that have been with us throughout the duration of this year, again, we thank you for your time and your commitment. I know that being part of one of the 9 different work groups and jumping into some of those special projects or initiatives are oftentimes time consuming and can pull you away from other priorities. So we really appreciate everyone sticking with it and are excited to kind of get through some of those updates and hear from the chairs and work group co-chairs a little bit about where we've landed here at the last month of the year, and excited and gearing up and ready to start looking forward to 2024. And I'll have more on that in just a little bit. Also want to just say, mindful, guys, that the chat is turned on for the moment. So if you do have questions or thoughts, please utilize the chat. And if we do not have time to answer as we go, I'll try to save a little bit of time at the end for Q&A. But that being said, you're always welcome to email me directly after the meeting or contact me. Typically, we try to fit as much as possible into these meetings, so we don't always have time for Q&A. But I know that Brian Atkinson, who is our topical presenter today, will also drop his chat or his contact information into the chat. So if you have special questions for him in regards to his presentation, you're always free to reach out to him after the fact as well. So we can go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen. So give me just a second as I pull up our PowerPoint here. Get in presentation mode for you guys. Okay. It's going to be challenging for me to see everybody because I'm working off my two screens, but still have to kind of keep my little teams bubble up. So at any point, if it is not showing the presentation, please somebody, Lindsay, if you don't mind just coming off mute and letting me know, that would be great. But again, as I said, excited to go ahead and get started and get through our last end of year updates. For those of you that this might be your first quarterly meeting, welcome. We're excited to have you, especially those that are sitting in today because you're interested to learn a little bit more about joining. And if you applied for the 2024 task force year, this might be your first quarterly meeting and you're just here to learn. So we really extend a gracious welcome to those, of course, as well as our returning members as well. Due to the number of participants, we typically do not allow for individual introductions. There's just so many of you, and as much as I would love to hear from each and every one of you for time's sake, we typically do not do that in a virtual setting. So I am just going to kind of shout out some of the disciplines that I know are represented here today. And then, of course, if I do not happen to mention your discipline, you are welcome to drop that into the chat. So just want to say hello and thank these various professions and sectors that are represented maybe by prosecution, law enforcement, our victim advocates, service providers, our survivors or those with lived experiences, our medical personnel and staff, community partners, our state and federal agency partners, anyone within the legal sphere outside of maybe prosecution, and then, of course, those existing in the education and academia sectors as well. So if I did not call your discipline, you're welcome to drop that in the chat so we can give you a little shout out. And again, of course, because we are in this virtual setting, should we be in person, we do try to leave time at the end for networking. But again, just because of kind of the virtual setting and that being a little bit more challenging to do so, we will not be offering any sort of networking opportunity via chat after the meeting or even on camera. So if there's someone that you hear from throughout the duration of today's meeting that you're looking to specifically connect with, you can shoot me an email and I'm happy to go ahead and get you in touch with that person. Ooh. So for those of you that this might be your first meeting, I know that we always tend to go through kind of the structure and the purpose of the task force, but it's really important that we do touch on the foundation and just talk a little bit about how the task force was formed, and then, of course, some of those specialized focuses that we have. So we do operate under a strategic framework, as you can see here under your, or on your screen there. Under each of these different 5 elements of trafficking, you will find one of the 9 different work groups. So here on your screen will come up, create, develop a special project or initiative that helps to encompass that specific element that their group falls under. So for example, survivors supported and protected will look to kind of encompass or focus their projects around withdrawal. Apprehending, investigating, and prosecution, which is our work group 5 members, they are looking to obviously focus on the exploitation element and so forth. So you all can see there listed that each of those 5 different elements is addressed by at least one of the work groups on the task force. Here's just another look at each of the 9 different work groups. It's important to note that in 2019, I believe, we did add work group 9. The statewide human trafficking task force has historically been focused on CSEC, or commercial sexual exploitation of children. And we really wanted to make sure, of course, that we were giving that visibility back to our adults with lived experiences, whether that be primary survivors and secondary survivors or caregivers, loved ones, etc. So that's when we created Work Group 9, which has a specific focus of examining domestic adult sex trafficking. And then also in 2019, we made that shift to focus Work Group 6, more so on our foreign-born and labor trafficking population as well. All right, at this time, we're going to go ahead and dive in and start to hear from some of our work group chairs and co-chairs. So Carla Jacobs, who's with Georgia Commission on Women, and Harlan Swinger Ross, who joins us from Fellowship Community Outreach, chair and co-chair Work Group One. And Work Group One has that specific focus on community awareness and education, and they're really kind of our public outreach group and do quite a lot around that specific focus. So I'm going to turn it over to Carla. And Carla, if you'd like to tell the group about what you guys have been up to, that'd be great.
Awesome. I'll be glad to. We have had a fantastic year, y'all. First thing I want to do is give a shout out to the members of Work Group One. You guys have been fantastic. You've shown up for meetings. We decided at the very beginning that our meetings would be working meetings and that we would do as much of our work during our 2-hour monthly meetings as we could. And we were able to do that. So I appreciate you guys showing up every month and every meeting and really diving in and getting the work done this year. Also want to say thank you to the folks at the CJCC. We could not do this if it were not for you. We appreciate all of the support you guys give us, the administrative support, the setting up the meetings, all of the things that you guys do in the background that help make our work group successful. We appreciate you. We appreciate all of you. We did some great things this year. We were able to finish up one of our projects, which was to update the training compendium that we put together back in 2020. That was our COVID quarantine project, was to take a look at all of the different trainings that are available nationwide. Some of them are general trainings, some of them are industry specific trainings. And we made a compendium of those. We went through and we updated, we added some, we removed some, and that new document is ready. It's currently waiting for CJCC approval. And once it's approved, it will be available for all of you guys to use. So I hope that you will take advantage of that document and that information. We also want to do a training compendium specific to the faith-based community, and we started work on that this year. We've already made a list of training programs that we plan to vet next year when we get our new task force members. If there's anyone that you think we need to consider as part of the faith-based training compendium, you can reach out to Erica, drop it in the chat. I will write those down from the chat if there's any that you think that you want to make sure that we have on the list. So we want to vet as many programs as we can. So just let us know what you guys know through your networks. And then finally, we are the group that does the conversations with an expert. And these are they're lunch and learns. They're in a lunch and learn format. They're just kind of deep dives into narrow topics. It's an opportunity for folks that work on the human trafficking issue to dive deeper and to expand their knowledge on different aspects of the human trafficking issue, because it's very large. So we did 4 this year. Well, we scheduled 4 this year. We were able to do 3 of them. In March, we did gang facilitated trafficking. In June, we partnered with the the Georgia Coalition to Combat Human Trafficking, their Policy and Legislation Subcommittee, to give a legislative update of laws that were passed during the session last spring, at winter and spring. So we got an update on that. In September, we had planned to offer one on the exploitation of boys and young men, and we had to cancel that at the last minute because our speaker became ill, and we plan to reschedule that as soon as possible. And then in November, we partnered again with the coalition, their Policy and Legislation Subcommittee, to present I'm Just a Georgia Bill, which talked about the legislative process in Georgia, how a bill becomes a law, how the budget process works, and all the different places along the lines that we as advocates can step in to try to advance the process. So that is an excellent one to go back and watch. And they also had some great examples of best practices for working with your specific legislators, both in the House and the Senate, and just how to be better advocates and how we can help advance our cause with the human trafficking issue with our elected officials. So that was fantastic. Next year, we are going to present Conversations with an Expert again, as many as we can get scheduled. And we'll reschedule our September conversation that got canceled. And then we also have on the list teen dating violence. So those are our two we're going to start off with. I think Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month is February. So we're working on getting a speaker and getting something scheduled for February. So once we have our new work group members, starting in the first of the year, we will come up with a list of additional Conversations with an Expert to share with you guys. If you missed any this year, if you've missed any from the last 3 years that we have done this program, they are available on the CJCC's YouTube page. So I will drop that playlist link in the chat as well. And so that's all I've got, Erica. And if Carolyn wants to add anything, go right ahead.
Excellent. Thank you, Carla. I really appreciate you. And thank you, Work Group 1 members. Conversations with an Expert continues to be a hit every year. So we're excited for this project to continue. And just really want to kind of thank you guys for continuing to show up. I know that especially in a technical or virtual world, it's not always easy. And that being said, I just got kicked out and was able to jump back in quickly. So if I lose you guys again, Lindsay's happy to take over, but I'll just kind of continue to come back in. Technology works until it doesn't. So we'll just continue to fight through. So thank you, Work Group 1. All right, going to go ahead and hear now from Work Group 2. Work Group 2 is chaired by Jessica Stewart, and Jessica Stewart joins us from Open Door Talk Counseling Services. So I think, yep, I just saw Jessica's camera turn on. And Work Group 2 has historically focused and continues to focus on youth awareness and safety. So Jessica, I'll go ahead and toss it over to you.
Thank you, Erica. Hopefully you all can hear me. And so, yes, my name is Jessica Stewart, Chief Program Manager with Open Door Talk and the Chair of Work Group 2. I just want to start by just saying thanks to all of our group members this year who have been diligently working through both research and the creation of our project this year. So this year we started off with a new project looking to create a toolkit for middle school to high school aged youth that just aims to better equip them with resources in deterring their engagement and recruitment and grooming behaviors. This was a new and different project trajectory for us because we've historically focused on keeping prevention information from youth from the victim and survivor standpoint. And so we were focusing on the aspect of peer-to-peer exploitation and the deterring of that engagement in those practices. And so we started off with a lot of research and studying what's out there, identifying the gaps in research, and then creating and organizing our project. And we are continuing with that project that will go into the 2024 year. And everyone has brought their expertise and has come to the groups each month ready to support and help with their different tools that they have from, their practices and different training. So been really grateful to work alongside of all you all this year in those projects. We also have 2 long-term ongoing research projects that I just got some updates on that has been done in partnership with Kennesaw State University, led by Dr. Dorothy Marcel, and she's been definitely championing that practice with a lot of our group members, assisting her where needed. And so that first research project was to develop a facilitation guide to interview youth who are receiving services so that we could better identify prevention touch points and learn, what ways that we can better support our youth, what gaps, what things we're missing, what things would have just made a difference and what barriers they're experiencing. And so we are continuing with that guide, and she has her staff ready to start those interviews in the beginning of next year. And then we also have conducted another research project in which we reviewed and we looked at different we reviewed and we looked at different resources for youth who we were trying to learn the best way that youth identify prevention and they get information from each other. And so that resource and that research has been completed. And right now we're just cleaning up the data and analyzing that so that we can have that information ready in the 24 year. And so through both of those projects, those have been ongoing across a couple of years for us. And so throughout that time, we've had different folks who've been able to really assist us, and we're really excited for the findings and to be able to share all of those findings with you all. And so those are the three things that we have. And as we start next year, we're going to continue along with our toolkit, and following the creation of the toolkit and the facilitation guide of the toolkit will also be a caregiver and adult professional facing training that partners with that we'll be continuing to work on in the 2024 year.
Excellent. Thank you, Jessica. It's a lot to summarize, so I appreciate that. And thank you, Work Group 2 members. I know that sometimes people can get kind of in the weeds with research and it might not be the most glamorous thing, but we also know how important it is to be able to, produce and really kind of dive into quality research and be able to produce those results in a way that's meaningful for the field and those of us that work in it. So thank you, Jessica, for your leadership. Thank you, Work Group 2, for all you've done. We're excited to see those findings as we kind of move through the next steps. All right, going to toss it over now to Work Group 3. Work Group 3 focuses on deterring traffickers and buyers. It's currently chaired by Kayla Peoples with the Department of Driver Services and Nikosha Harris, who is right here with CJCC. So Nikosha and or Kayla, I'm not sure which of you guys is going to be jumping in and speaking, but whichever of you are ready, we are ready to hear from Work Group 3.
Hi, good morning to everyone. So me and Kayla have been the co-chairs for Work Group 3. She's been a co-chair longer than I have. This is my first year. She was the co-chair prior. In the past year, what our work group have done is we partnered with Georgia State University, and we did a I don't know why I'm talking. It's a Blue Table Talk series. Where they focus on conversations that surround student wellness and how issues in the Atlanta area are affecting those students on campus. We did that in September. We are also having another session in January. And similar to Work Group 1, as soon as that recording is approved from our communications team, that will be posted on Georgia State's website as well for viewing. We're also in talks with Kayla, what is the name of the group? I'm sorry. It's men.
I think it's Men Against Violence.
I'm sorry. It's Men Against Violence. To help see if we can bring the John schools to the state of Georgia. And if you're not familiar with what John schools are, it is basically a diversion program for low-level sex offenders. Instead of them going to jail, it's sort of like, think of if someone's arrested for a DUI, they can go to a diversion program where they pay for this class and they have to go through these trainings, and they're held accountable that way versus going straight to jail. Now, with the John School, there is one caveat. Men stopping violence. I'm sorry. So with the John schools, there is one caveat. There cannot be any violent offenders, and minors cannot be involved in the crime that was committed. With the John schools, it is fully self-supported through the fees that the participants have to pay for the classes. And also, if they are not fully committed to the program, or if they are not meeting the requirements of the program, at that point they will be referred back to their probation officer and the courts, where they will handle that. So it's not just a get out of jail free card. It is something that would be taken very seriously, and it hopes to minimize repeat offenders. So we're working with them. They're a group out of Texas, where they already have the program set up in place. And so we're hoping to see if we can get more works on that and hopefully get that moving forward in this upcoming year. Kayla, did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
So the Men Stopping Violence is the Georgia based
Okay.
group. The Texas, what is the name of that diversion program? We have to put it in the group chat. So I don't know, or if anyone can add in addition to this. I'm not sure if Georgia has any pre-trial diversion programs, which is essentially what Nikosha was talking about with the John School. And with us focusing on sex traffickers, exploiters, and buyers, and how that alternative is there to essentially reduce the possibility of those defendants being prosecuted for sex buying. We're looking to see as a work group how we can contribute to that coming to Georgia. And there is a group in Texas that successfully started one, and we're hoping that we can mirror what they did as well, and then work in collaboration with Georgia organizations with the Men Stopping Violence to see how we can maybe test run it or trial it or get their feedback on it. So yeah, Nakosha pretty much summed up. We are a small group hoping to grow in number next year. I think we had a great year with as far as being present at some schools during their Victim Assistance Week. We went to a school in Gainesville, I think,
The
earlier this
University
year.
of North Georgia.
University of North Georgia. We had some booths set out there. And then with our presence with Georgia State at the Blue Table Talk and building a partnership with them for going into 2024. So yeah, that's SORT Group 3.
Yeah. And Georgia we do have pretrial diversion programs. The CJCC actually does some of the funding for some of those courts. So there's a lot throughout the state. Every county is different, of course. So we're just trying to see if we can get that program across the board.
Yeah, thank you, Work Group 3. The group from Texas is United Against Human Trafficking,
Yes.
and they're the ones that have really been able to kind of be a pioneer in this space and really kind of move that forward. So much to learn from other programs in other states that have been successful. We know that it's a very niche kind of focus within trafficking work, but we appreciate you guys. I know that in 2024, we're hoping to partner with the Georgia Coalition to Combat Human Trafficking, that's also operated and kind of overseen here under CJCC's efforts, to see what we can kind of do in bringing those two coalition or our task forces together and kind of work jointly on this effort and see what might be possible via legislation. So thank you guys. Thank you, Work Group 3. Appreciate that. And I echo Kayla's sentiment, hoping to grow in numbers for 2024. We know that this is not everyone's focus, but we are excited to kind of see who kind of moves into this more specific or narrowed focus in the new year. So thank you guys. All right, going to go ahead and move right along over to Work Group 4. Work Group 4 is co-chaired by Kathy Butler with Comfort in the Storm and Michaela Dittman with Paulding Child Advocacy Center. And thank you both. I know that we have also been very busy in Work Group 4 creating some modules that they will tell you about in just one second. Work Group 4's historical focus and present focus alike has been keeping at-risk youth safe. And I know that they have been very busy with the creation of some modules. So Kathy and or Michaela, I will turn it over to you guys and let you fill us in.
Well, hello, Erica. Thank you so much. I am Kathy Butler, and as Erica mentioned, my co-chair is Michaela Dittman, and we are working on some pretty exciting things over here with Work Group 4. It took us about 18 months, but we finalized our learning modules for youth, and we have essentially been able to provide training to a number of youth here in this last year, primarily focusing with Youth Spark, but we have been able to address the needs of youth, be it those who identify as female, those who identify as male, as well as those who identify as LGBTQIA+. And so we've been able to present those modules to each particular group to make sure that we're meeting their inherent needs. And they have been very successful. So we've been really excited about that. Just to give you an overview of the modules, they do cover Human Trafficking 101. So for a youth who is not familiar with what human trafficking is, we do define that particular terminology for them and then give them various demonstrations to better help them understand what human trafficking what human trafficking is, and more so through the lens of sex trafficking. We then move into social media safety, since we know our youth are all on social media. We're not going to get them off of it. So we might as well train them to be more responsible in how they're using it, but also how to identify some of those particular red flag behaviors that they may encounter from others. Then we move into culture and how culture has desensitized us in the process of addressing human trafficking, specifically sex trafficking. So while we're not demonizing the music that they're listening to or any of the programming that they may view, we do want them to understand how themes of trafficking have permeated through these particular mediums, and how they can be better stewards of basically getting the message across, to their peers about consent and issues of criminal behavior and predatory behavior, things of that nature. And then finally, we're going to talk to them about essentially what to do if they themselves think that they're at risk, or possibly they're seeing some signs, but they're not quite sure if it all applies to them or someone that they know. So how do they kind of define these things in their own lives and in the lives of their peers, and how do they go about getting help? And one of the ways that we're really driving these points home are through these scenarios. And so these are real life scenarios that we run them through. And essentially, as we're giving them pieces and elements of a story, we're asking them to be a little bit more to scrutinize, I guess you would say, the information a little bit more closely to see if they see themes of potentially harmful or flat out, criminal behavior, so that they can really help to identify, again, when these things are happening in their own lives or in the lives of their peers. Now, most recently, we developed a flyer, which is available on the CJCC website, and it's a marketing tool so that for you and anyone else that you know who have youth that you are responsible for, or you're trying to get information out to, you can actually contact us, and we can talk about possibly training your youth. So if you're interested in doing that, you can certainly find that flyer on the CJCC website, and we'll try and get it dropped in the chat for you today. And then we also created a takeaway this year, and this takeaway is essentially going to be given to the youth who attend the trainings to help reinforce the information that we've shared with them. So they attend the training, they get this takeaway, and it goes through some of the higher level talking points, but it also gives them, again, information on how they can get help. So if they have questions, if they're not quite sure if they're a victim of trafficking, if they know someone and they're trying to seek help for that individual, it has all of the elements that they need to reach out to get the help for themselves and for their peer. And then we're also finalizing a Train the Trainer guide. So for those folks who are coming into our work group next year, and they will to become responsible for delivering this training, we have created this Train the Trainer that essentially walks them through how to present the curriculum, what was the rationale behind some of the content that we created, and really some of the do's and don'ts, so to say, about how to present the curriculum, because there was a very integral process in terms of how we develop this content and how we wanted to present it. So that's where we are right now. And then moving into 2024, we're looking at potentially new initiatives that are designed to address the needs of working professionals, so be it teachers or other folks in youth serving organizations. We're trying to figure out how do we get more information out to them so that they better understand the problem and know how to address it from their end and recognize predatory behavior, etc. Did I miss anything, Michaela?
Nope, I think you covered it all beautifully, Kathy. And I will see if I can find that link for the flyer that we were talking about, so we can get that in the chat. And that also gives information on how to contact Kathy or myself, so that we can get a training scheduled for you if you're interested in that for yourself or your organization.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys, and thank you, Work Group 4. And Liza has actually dropped into the chat. She said, big shout out from our expressions case manager at Youth Spark on how safe and affirming the training felt for our LGBTQ kids. So big shout out to you guys. I know that partnership with Youth Spark has proved fruitful, and we're excited to maintain that. And thank you, Youth Spark, for allowing the group to come in and really be part of that opportunity with your kiddos. So we're really excited for that.
We thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you guys. Thank you, Work Group 4. I know the modules pouring over them for the last 18 months has been a lot, but we really appreciate your diligence and your commitment. We continue to hear great things about the content that you all have created and excited to see that continue to be pushed out across the state. So thank you all.
Thank
All
you.
right. My right-hand woman, Alina Acosta, who most of you know, and helps me out with a lot of the day-to-day with the task force, has been for the last several weeks and will continue to be for the next several weeks out in Malaysia and Thailand. She's actually doing some anti-trafficking work out there. So although we miss her, we wanted to make sure, of course, that she was getting that opportunity. So I am actually going to be speaking a little bit on behalf of both Work Group 5 and Work Group 6. Alina is very heavily handed in both of those work groups, and typically she would be the one to report out on these groups. But in her absence, I will be the one just providing you guys with a brief update. But did just want to shout out to Work Group 5 and 6 members. I know that many of you are on the meeting here today. Work Group 5 has historically been our prosecution and law enforcement group. It has really had that strong focus on apprehending, investigating, and prosecution. And we did just complete what we did call the Work Group 5 two-day training. It's kind of since transitioned into kind of a bigger and broader topic since. But we did just finish up that two-day training down in Augusta, Georgia, and had the opportunity to really speak to a room full of law enforcement and prosecutors alike, as well as some service providers and folks from other disciplines that were able to join us for that two-day training, where we really take a deep dive into looking at those various elements that come along with investigating and prosecuting human trafficking cases. We know that oftentimes these cases are not the easiest cases to move through the judicial system. And so, just having the opportunity to get in front of those disciplines and really talking through kind of best practice is an excellent way to kind of bring great minds to the table. So we just completed that last month. But other than the two-day training, Work Group 5 has continued to work really diligently on developing the Human Trafficking Response Guide. And that guide is providing professionals in the field, law enforcement, first responders, prosecutors, medical, victim service providers, etc., with the knowledge and guidance on how to respond to trafficking cases appropriately, effectively here in Georgia. Those objectives are to support the project, include highlighting the benefits of a multidisciplinary approach, outlining best practices for each discipline at every stage of a human trafficking case. And then, of course, lastly, providing that trauma-informed and victim-centered lens and resources that will enable professionals to ensure that victims are safe and, of course, those offenders are held accountable. The group has continued to make great strides in the development of the guide. I also know that this has been a labor of love. I really appreciate your commitment and dedication to this initiative. We are at several pages long already, and I know that we will have to look at cutting that down as we continue to edit and revise it. But as soon as it is in kind of its complete and final stage, we will get that approved, of course, through communications here at CJCC, and then that will be widely available for folks online to kind of look at, download, keep, hand out as a resource to your agencies, etc. So thank you guys. Thank you, Work Group 5, and all that you've been able to do on that guide. All right, going to go ahead and shift over to Work Group 6. Alina co-chairs Work Group 6 with Priscilla Baravecci, and Priscilla joins us from GAIN, or Georgia Asylum Immigration Network. And I forgot to mention that our two main chairs for Work Group 5 are Caitlin Salinas, and she joins us from the Office of the Attorney General here in Georgia, and then Kathleen Fernandez Miller, and Kathleen joins us from Cobb County Sheriff's Office, so didn't want to skip over their names. But Work Group 6 is focused on those foreign-born and labor trafficking victims. And as I mentioned back in 2019, we really kind of shifted that focus of the work group and made sure that we were trying to give as much visibility and representation to survivors and individuals with lived experience specific to labor trafficking. So they have also been a very busy group. Thank you, Work Group 6. Many of you are on the call today, and we would really like to just kind of extend that gratitude. You all have also been working diligently, making great strides in building out a toolkit. That toolkit is going to better equip local businesses here in the state with tools and knowledge to combat and minimize the risk specific of labor trafficking and exploitation within those business practices. So the project is providing a framework that's addressing and supporting the businesses known to be vulnerable to labor trafficking here in Georgia, but also providing training and awareness about labor trafficking, and the resources that we might have available to address, and then provide those very necessary and needed services to those victims. So this year, Workgroup 6 has partnered with the Block Firm, which is a business litigation firm, to assist in developing sample policy documents. And the group intends to provide business partners in the state, such as compliance plans, supplier and business codes of conduct, grievance plans, etc. So a huge thank you to the Block Firm for their hard work and their partnership. And again, thank you, Workgroup 6. I know that this has been really kind of taken on a different shape as we continue to move through the project, but I appreciate everyone sticking with it and excited to see really what kind of 2024 brings. So thank you, guys. All right, I'm going to go ahead now and turn it over to Workgroup 7. Workgroup 7 is chaired by Mary Gates from Map to Hope and co-chaired by Dr. Margie Gill, who joins us from Tabitha's House. Also been a very busy group. Workgroup 7 has focused really historically and still presently on survivors supported and protected. And they also have a lot going on, kind of two projects happening simultaneously. So I'm going to go ahead now and turn it over to Mary and Margie, and you guys can give us your update.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Margie Gill, the Executive Director of Tabitha's House, and I am the Executive Director of DEIB and an Associate Professor of Psychology at Brenau University. So I co-chair Workgroup 7 with Ms. Mary Gates, the founder and director of Map to Hope. I would like to personally thank the CJCC staff and all of the work group members on our on Workgroup 7 for serving on this group, but for enduring the developing stages of this research project. We are working on and assisting in developing the guide that will come out of the research project. So what we're doing what we did this past year was work on a formal research study. So Workgroup 7 partnered with Brenau University to conduct a formal research study on survivor perspectives on anti-trafficking awareness approaches and marketing materials. In this process, the graduate students at Brenau, they conducted a full literature review, and they have submitted the application to the IRB committee. So we're just in the waiting stages right now to gain approval to conduct that qualitative research study. But we know due to the holidays, there will be a delay in getting the decision. We won't get that decision probably until the end of January in the new year in 2024. But when approval is granted, the students will conduct interviews with adult survivors to explore the survivor perspective on how do they feel when they see the anti-trafficking marketing materials? And they will be asked questions to address their definition of human trafficking from a survivor's lens. More specifically, they'll even identify themes across the participants that will be discussed in the findings section, and hopefully we'll be able to glean more information on from the survivor's perspective. We will also examine how adults who have experienced commercial sexual exploitation feel about the use and sharing of their stories by organizations conducting the anti-trafficking advocacy, outreach, marketing, and fundraising efforts. All of this information will be compiled, and hopefully we'll be able to get some type of recommendations to enhance awareness training, marketing, and anti-trafficking efforts. And the findings from this project will flow over into our other project of creating the guidebook. And I think Mary is here and she'll say more about the guidebook.
And Margie, Mary might be having some tech issues. I know she's just emailed.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Mary.
Hi there. Thank you, Dr. Gill. That was very thorough as always. It has been a real pleasure to work with our team. Again, thank you to Workgroup 7. You all have really held on through this process of research, and the team on Workgroup 7 contributed beyond heavily to the actual research project. They were writing the questions that will be asked to survivors in the semi-structured interviews. They were forming the actual research questions that will be informing the entire research study. So it was very exciting to be a part of all of that. Of course, research does move slowly. So it has, we have been a bit in the weeds with that this year, but it is very exciting. It's also been really, truly wonderful to have the students from Brenau present in the task force to educate us on things that they're learning from their literature review, to ask questions. It's been tremendously encouraging to see their passion for the project. I had the honor of sitting on the committee to hear their thesis, and actually I did cry because it is so powerful to hear their passion to center survivors in the narrative of their experience. And as Dr. Gill said, what we're trying to elicit is a perspective on the survivors about what language they would use to describe their experience, instead of us saying, what language we might think would be best for marketing, et cetera, how they would describe their experience and the meaning that they make from it. And also the recommendations that they have around images that they think are helpful or not helpful. So we are hoping, as Dr. Gill said, to create a tactical guidebook out of this. It will incorporate the research. So once we start to get the research back next year and analyze it for themes, we will be turning that into essentially a best practice guidebook for all of you. We would also like to elicit some feedback from those of you on the task force about case studies, ways in which you have learned to do anti-trafficking marketing better in a more survivor sensitive way. So next year, be looking for a bit of a survey from us about anti-trafficking marketing, best practices for your organization, if you have grown and evolved in the way that you do that work. That is something that we want to know. We want to include that in the guidebook to really have a strength-based perspective to encourage other advocates to continue to do this in a more survivor-sensitive way. So I think this research does have really significant implications in the field, and we're really excited to get the data back next year.
Excellent. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Margie. Really appreciate it. I echo all of those sentiments. It's been a real gift to have the Brenau University students along with us this year, and their dedication and commitment has not gone unnoticed. So, Dr. Gill, thank you for that, extending your network and allowing us to lean on that extra support. I know that it's been a great use to the work group members. And excited to see the marketing guide continue to move forward as well. As we all know, really kind of the marketing of survivors or those with lived experiences is ever changing. And so we really want to make sure that we're kind of keeping that in mind and maintaining their true vision in a trauma informed way. So thank you guys. Thank you, Work Group 7, for all your work. We're excited for next year. All right, going to move on now to Work Group 8. Work Group 8 focusing on survivors recovering and thriving. It has for the last couple of years now been chaired graciously by Amy Waldron from Devereaux. And along with her is Karen Conyers from Georgia Center for Child Advocacy. And a real big part of their group and of their initiative has been partnering with Georgia Center. So thankful for that continued partnership with you all. And I'll go ahead now and toss it over to you, Amy or Karen, and let you guys give us an update.
Thank you, Erica. Karen couldn't be with us today. She's actually on a grant meeting, which is one of the reasons we're able to do the work group. The work of Work Group 8 is through their grants that they've been able to get renewed every year. So I'll give a report today. We did have a really productive year on Work Group 8, and we've continued our partnership with the Georgia Center for Child Advocacy, their Envision project, which they just got renewed for 3 years on a federal grant. Yay! And so that's super exciting and constitutes a lot of work to show the meaningful work that's been done to this point, and then to get it renewed for 3 more years is really exciting. So we basically provided enrichment sessions, we call them, to all the youth in our residential programs that are trafficked youth who are being served by our residential programs, Gigi's House, Wellspring Living, and Devereaux, where I work. And we've done anything from all kinds of different topics, personal growth and development, life skills, career support, sometimes just basic things like cooking a meal together, We've had career days where we bring in adults who are in particular careers that might be interesting to the youth and talk with them about that. Basically, trying to connect them with a healthier future, so to speak, for them, or help them envision what they want to be and want to do with their lives outside of being in the life. So we added also this year the Ending the Game curriculum in at Wellspring and Devereaux. And if you're not familiar, the Ending the Game curriculum is developed by Rachel Thomas, who is a survivor leader out of California. And it's a 10-week curriculum that we found to be very impactful. It's a resiliency curriculum focused on understanding exploitation and manipulation, how to recognize those kinds of signs in relationships or just in life in general, and then how to end those strategies, basically. So recognize the game, and then how do you end it? And we've also had sessions by Rhea Story, who's also a survivor leader and also on our work group as a volunteer, to do sessions with the youth on personal development, goal setting, all kinds of things like that. So, and lastly, I'll just share that we were very privileged to present on these on our work from Work Group 8 at the Shared Hope International Conference, and some of you were there. So we were really happy with the response we got there from people about this work that we've been doing with Work Group 8. So as part of the task force. So we had a lot of questions from people in the audience about, how do I do that? How do I get that started? And of course, the umbrella over what we do is, of course, the task force itself. So we were able to, articulate that. So really excited to keep this going in 2024. And hopefully some of you will be a part of that with our work group. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy. Thank you, Work Group 8 members. I know that you guys have also been busy, and such a great success and honor to, have the opportunity to present at Shared Hope this year. So thank you guys for doing that and making a shameless plug for the task force all the way out there. We're really excited, of course, when it's represented, especially on a national scale. So thank you guys all for your work. Excited for next year and to see what we're able to do with the partnership with Georgia Center through the Envision Project. So thank you guys. All right, last but not least, we're going to go ahead now and turn it over to Work Group 9. Work Group 9 is chaired also by Dr. Margie Gill from Tabitha's House. She's a busy lady, and co-chaired by Hillary Desjardins from Frontline Response. And Work Group 9, as I mentioned earlier today in the meeting, has really kind of been the last addition to the task force, or the most recent addition, I should say, to the task force, making sure that we're giving that representation to our adult survivors of sex trafficking. So Margie, I'm not sure if you and or Hillary are going to be co-updating or if it's just going to be you today, but I'll go ahead and toss it over to you.
Yep, it'll be me. I'll give a summary. It's me again, I'm Dr. Margie Gill, and I'm giving an update. And well, first, before I even give the update, I want to say a big heartfelt thank you to the awesome Work Group 9 members for their commitment and dedication, and for helping us complete our projects for 2023. As an ongoing project, one of the things that we are doing is personally reaching out to industry leaders in housing, transportation, finance, and other business sectors to increase collaborations and to address challenges adult survivors face, in these sectors. So last year, we conducted a roundtable discussion to address challenges associated with securing housing. And the objective of that roundtable was to discuss, just the barriers that survivors face. And it was a good moment for the industry leaders to see and to hear from survivors, because at that roundtable discussion, we had 3 survivors speak on their experience about securing housing. And I think some of the people who were there, that it was an eye-opening experience to hear, because they didn't even consider some of the barriers that came directly from, the survivor's voice. So we were able to accomplish the objective of having that diverse representation of housing experts, leasing agents, banking and lending experts, survivors, service providers, all in the same space to come up with remedies to address the disparities that the survivors experience. So now we are in the process of compiling all of that feedback into a resource that could be disseminated to everybody, and so that we're all on the same page as it relates to what can we do to improve these efforts. What were the recommendations and the findings of our roundtable discussion? Additionally, in October, a couple months ago, we completed our other project of conducting a webinar that highlight issues and identify possible solutions that impact survivors. We kind of modeled one of our peer groups, work group 1. We did a conversations with an expert style webinar. I got to give work group 1 their credit for that. The emphasis of that webinar was on the equality model, partial decriminalization. And what the equality model does is prioritize the rights of those who have been exploited while holding the buyers and exploiters accountable for any harm that they cause. There's a broad consensus about the gender justice and human rights communities across the political spectrum. So the topic definitely has two diverging views. One side argued for full decriminalization or legalization of the entire commercial sex industry, including pimps, brothels, sex buyers. The other side argued for social services for and the decriminalization of those who are prostituted or trafficked, while holding pimps, brothel owners, Johns accountable for the harm that they cause. So we were really fortunate to have two people, Rebecca Zipkin and Delilah Locke, with World Without Exploitation, to give a very informative presentation to increase understanding and to answer questions about the differences between the two. What does that look like from a social lens, from a political lens, from a financial lens? They gave quite a bit of information to help increase understanding around this topic. And as a result, we received really good feedback from the attendees and hope to continue that conversation around this topic because it's definitely needed. But going into 2024, we are open to new initiatives to address matters that impact adult survivors. So thank you all.
Thank you, Margie. Thank you, Work Group 9. I know that there were lots of folks that reached out after the equality model webinar and expressed lots of interests and really kind of gratitude for being able to bring that topic to light. So thank you guys for all of your work. And again, we're excited to move into the new year and see what you guys are able to accomplish. So thank you all. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Brian Atkinson. Brian is a colleague, and we have worked alongside him for the last couple of years now. Brian joins us from the CEAS Clinic, or the Child Endangerment and Sexual Exploitation Clinic, under the University of Georgia Law School. So we're excited to have Brian here speak with us a little bit about Survivors First Act and give some reviews and updates. I think that we've provided a presentation on this topic previously, but there have been some movement on that front. So we wanted to give Brian and some of his team the opportunity to just kind of give us a brief update on what's happening with Survivors First, and of course to make sure that everyone on the call, especially those of you that are working with victims every single day, understand really the depth of this law and legislation and really kind of how far-reaching it can be. So Brian, I'm going to stop sharing. If you have a presentation that you would like to share, I just want to make sure that you have permissions, the right permissions to do so.
Great. Thank you, Erica.
And let me know if you're having any trouble.
Still waiting on it to give me permission to share. Oh, I think there it goes.
That's great. We can see it,
Okay,
Brian.
is that working?
Yep, we can see everything. I will ask Brian if it's okay for folks to kind of hold questions until maybe you finish, if that's all right, just to kind of keep with the flow and try to keep us on time.
Sure. Great. Thank you, Erica.
Yeah.
Like Erica said, my name is Brian Atkinson. I'm the staff attorney at the Wilbanks Child Endangerment and Sexual Exploitation Clinic, the CEASE clinic here at the University of Georgia School of Law. We are a legal clinic. Just to give you a little bit of information about who we are, we work with and train law students on representing survivors of child sexual abuse and exploitation. We practice in a couple of different areas, including representing survivors of trafficking and post-conviction relief, vacatur, record restriction under the Survivors First Act that we're going to talk about in just a minute. But we also provide direct representation to youth who are in foster care throughout the state, who are either victims of childhood sexual abuse or CSEC, and we represent adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse in civil litigation matters. So the area of practice I want to talk to you all about today is that post-conviction relief under the Georgia Survivors First Act. So to give you a little bit of background on what this is, like Erica said, I think there was a presentation. I think I was a part of that a couple of years ago when this was first kind of coming into being. But this was created by, yes. This, sorry, was created by Senate Bill 435 in 2020. And the purpose was to create pathways specifically for survivors of human trafficking to either restrict access to their criminal records or to secure vacatur. The legislation was developed by survivor advocacy groups, various stakeholders, and members of the First Lady's Grace Commission here in Georgia. It went into effect in 2020, and it's been revised in 2022 that we're going to talk about how it was changed in just a little bit. But to give you a little bit of background on the impetus for why this is important and why this matters, there were a series of surveys done involving survivors of sex trafficking and trafficking generally, kind of leading up to this, where a vast majority, I think one of the surveys from 2016, 91% of the respondents reported having been arrested. And for over half of the respondents, every arrest on their criminal history was the result from having been trafficked. 42% of those survivors were arrested as minors, and over 40% were arrested 9 times or more, the majority arrested for crimes other than prostitution. So this, it's my understanding that some of the survivor advocacy groups identified this, some of those with lived experience identified the need for some way to restrict or vacate criminal records of survivors as one of the top priorities in helping them to move forward past that victimization and through their recovery. Because I think, as we'll talk about in a little bit, there are a number of collateral consequences that come from having a criminal conviction that impacts somebody's ability to gain employment. I think the numbers are that 87% of employers do some form of background checks, even if they want it to be self-employed. It affects their ability to get certain types of business licenses. It can impact education access, housing, access to public benefits if they need those to get started, and other ways that it can impact a person's life that makes moving on from a trafficking situation and recovering fully very difficult. So again, that's what this, the purpose of this vacatur and record restriction statutory scheme was designed to do. So I'm going to talk to you a little about what it does now and talk to you about how it's changed over the last couple of years. So this is codified at OCGA 1710-21 and 35.337. 1710-21 is the vacatur statute. 35.331J goes through record restriction. We'll talk about, so just to define a couple of terms that we're going to be using. Vacatur means going back and changing the outcome of the criminal process. It means reversing the conviction as if it had never happened. Record restriction means that public access to information on the state's arrest report through the GBI, GCIC is restricted and not available to people like employers, landlords. It's still going to be available generally to law enforcement and some other court-related services, but it restricts public access to those records. And then we're going to also talk about sealing. In addition to record restrictions, sealing means that the actual files that are kept and maintained by clerks of court or law enforcement or jails or other governmental records are restricted from being accessed by the public. So those are three different terms that we're going to talk about during this presentation. So vacatur, in order to access the vacatur statute, a survivor of trafficking can have a conviction vacated if they were convicted of an offense and sentenced as a direct result of being the victim of the offense of trafficking. And it goes on to say that if the conviction is vacated, it shall be restricted from public view on GCIC, and the court records can be sealed. So again, those are those three terms. The conviction is vacated, it's reversed as if it never happens, and it shall be restricted on that state arrest report. And then the court records and other records can be sealed. So there's three different types of remedies provided by this statute. In order to be eligible, the conviction must have been a direct result of the defendant being the victim of trafficking, and it can't have any outstanding warrants pending against the defendant in order to petition for vacatur of a conviction. The process, these vacatur petitions must be submitted on a form that's promulgated by the Attorney General's office, which are available on their website. The petitions must be served on the prosecutor of the offense. And I think, as we all know, in Georgia, we have 159 counties in Georgia. Each county has different courts. Each court sometimes has different prosecutors. So the individual prosecutor of the conviction is the entity that must be served for these petitions. The petition must have included with it a GCIC report that's no older than 3 business days prior to filing. And GCIC with the GBI does make these available pursuant to the statute at no cost for individuals if they're being used in these sorts of petitions for that filing process. Now, typically in our practice, we'll run a criminal history. One of the first things we do upon evaluating the case to find out what's out there and what we're looking at. Those sorts of record requests are not going to be provided at no cost. But when it comes to actually filing the petitions, the GCIC reports that are intended to be used with that filing are made available at no cost by the GBI if they're and they can be reached in a couple of different ways. If anybody wants to contact me, has issues going with that, I can give you contact information for them. They're very helpful. And these petitions, in addition to being on that completed form, they may include documentation of the status as a victim of trafficking. The statute talks about what that sort of documentation can be. It gives examples of copies of official records, certifications, or eligibility letters from courts or government agencies that show that a defendant was a victim of trafficking. It also includes things like affidavits, letters, or sworn testimony from members of clergy, medical professionals, victim service organizations, or certified licensed or registered professionals from whom the defendant has sought assistance, counseling, or legal counsel related to their victimization, and any other evidence that's relevant. And the statute says that if sufficient documentation is submitted along with the petition, there is a rebuttable presumption that the victim was a victim of trafficking that goes along with that documentation. The petition can include a request that the court file be sealed, and in evaluating whether or not to seal the court file related to a vacatur, the court's required to consider these factors under 35.337M, and that is if the harm to the individual's privacy outweighs the public interest in the criminal record. So you can include evidence that demonstrates the barriers a survivor has faced, including housing, employment, professional licensing, education, a lack of other history, time since their conviction, and evidence of their the steps that they have taken to move past that victimization. If that sealing request is granted, the clerk of court has 60 days to seal the file, and the statute also provides for ways that can be sealed with law enforcement and other agencies as well. So again, the procedure for these vacatur petitions, the petition is filed in the court that sentenced the survivor, and it's filed under seal. If the prosecutor consents in writing or fails to object within 30 days of the petition being filed, the court shall issue an order to vacate the conviction and shall issue an order to restrict the cycle on GCIC. If the prosecutor objects, the court's required to hold a hearing within 90 days of the petition being filed, where they determine by a preponderance of the evidence standards of just whether it's more likely than not, whether the conviction was a direct result of trafficking. And the statute also provides that if the conviction is vacated, any fines or fees paid by the survivor shall be returned to them. And this was a change that was made in the 2022 bill that we'll go over in just a minute to talk about the process for the return of fines and fees. So restriction sealing is a little bit different. The legal standard, rather than the conviction being the result of a survivor having been trafficked, if a survivor of trafficking has a conviction that occurred while they were being trafficked, then they can petition to have that conviction and the records of that conviction restricted and sealed. Again, if the conviction is restricted, the court records can be sealed. Two separate processes that go hand in hand, but need to be done separately and deliberately, because restriction doesn't automatically seal the records. Conviction and sentence must have occurred while the individual was a victim of trafficking. That's the eligibility for the restriction petition statute. Notably, that the difference is it doesn't require that the defendant doesn't have any outstanding warrants that the vacatur petition requires. Again, a similar process. This is submitted on the form promulgated by the Attorney General's office. Again, these forms are available at their website. I think the Attorney General has forms that are available for survivors who are doing this both with and without attorneys. So I think there are two different vacatur forms, two different restriction forms, one for survivors representing themselves, one for survivors who are represented by an attorney. And again, the prosecutor must be served, and the same sort of documentation of status as a victim of trafficking may be included. Again, just like in the vacatur statute, if that documentation is included, then it does create that rebuttable presumption that the victim was being trafficked when the conviction occurs. So again, you have to do the same request the court file be sealed, and that's a separate determination. The court will consider that by the evidence that the harm to the individual's privacy outweighs the public's interest in the criminal record being accessible. And again, you can include that same sort of evidence of the barriers the survivors faced, the lack of any other history and the time since the conviction. Again, if that sealing request is granted, there's a 60-day time period when that file must be sealed by the clerk's office. The actual petition, again, like with the vacatur petitions, is going to be filed under seal by the statute. If the prosecutor consents in writings or fails to object within 30 days, the court shall issue an order to restrict the cycle on GCIC. If the prosecutor objects, the court holds a hearing, again within 90 days of the petition being filed, and determines by that same preponderance of the evidence standard whether the conviction occurred while the defendant was a victim of trafficking. So we're going to talk about how the laws exist today is a little bit different than what we talked about a couple of years ago when we talked about the first version of this law. This law was revised in 2022 by Senate Bill 565 that went into effect on May 9th, 2022. And there were really three main changes to the law that bill provided for. The first and most significant is that it eliminated the time restriction. The initial statute 171021 says that the petition shall be submitted no earlier than 6 months following conviction and sentencing for a misdemeanor, or no earlier than 1 year following completion of a sentence for a felony offense. That was changed in 2022 to allow these petitions to be filed at any time following conviction or sentence for misdemeanors or felonies. So that's a a major change in when this relief can become available to a survivor. So like I said, this was the major change of that 2022 law, was to eliminate this time restriction, but it also provided for an actual process for the refund of fines and fees as a result of these petitions being successful. For any sentence vacated pursuant to 17-10-21, the court vacating the sentence shall include in the order for the return of any fines and fees paid by the defendant under the sentence in the amount paid by the defendant. So that's going to include fines, probation supervision fees, and all of the surcharges to that, which had created some issues between 2020 when the initial law passed and 2022 when this revision took place, with where does that money come from? Who is supposed to be reimbursing these defendants the fines and fees that they've paid for convictions that are now vacated? Because the fines and fees, depending on how the sentences are structured, can be collected by the clerk's office, they can be collected by probation. But then, if any of y'all have seen one of a fine sheet, you'll know that there are any number of surcharges that go on to a fine of a criminal conviction that include things like the law library fund, the sheriff's office retirement fund, the victim's compensation fund, and for drug offenses, there's a 50% surcharge that goes towards efforts to treat addiction statewide. So this provides for a streamlined method for the refund of any fines and fees that were paid by the defendants for these convictions that have now been vacated, which provides that the Georgia Crime Victims Emergency Fund is going to be responsible for the return of fines and fees paid by the defendant. And the Crime Victims Fund through CJCC has a specific application for this, again, available on their website, where the documentation of the vacatur order, as well as the amounts paid by the defendant for fines and fees for these, again, now vacated convictions, are submitted. They're processed, reviewed by that Crime Victims Fund, and then reimbursed to the defendant if the application is complete and satisfactory. So that's been a huge help. I've had clients receive that, go through that process, and receive the fine and fee money back that they paid for convictions that occurred while they were being trafficked and because they were being trafficked. It also clarifies the remote testimony provision that the defendant, petitioner, expert witness, or any other party can testify at the hearings by remote electronic means. Again, some of our survivors are trafficked through multiple counties. They're charged, arrested, convicted in multiple counties, multiple courts. So I think the legislature recognized that and specifically allowed for these any contested hearings to take place for testimony of those to be done remotely by the petitioners and any witnesses that they are going to be calling as experts at those hearings. So what to watch for? I want to talk to you all a little bit about some things that may be changing with this bill and some other things that may be coming down the pipeline of how this bill is or could be revised in the future. And before I talk about that, I've got to give my disclaimer. I am the staff attorney at the Wilbank Cease Clinic. We're a law clinic at the University of Georgia School of Law. And as part of UGA, we do not endorse or oppose any specific legislation. We do not endorse or oppose any legislation that may be related to the information that I'm providing today. And we don't endorse any suggested language or statutory language, and we do not engage in any lobbying and are not engaged in any lobbying related to any legislation, including any legislation that could be related to the information that I'm going to be providing today. So one issue that I believe may come up at the next legislative session involves the conflict between Georgia's first offender schemes, both under Title 42 and 1613-2, conditional discharge, and the Vacatur Act as it exists now. Because 17-10-21 allows for defendants who were convicted and sentenced to petition for vacatur of those convictions and their sentences that they may currently be serving. Survivors who were sentenced as first offenders under Title 42 or convicted under conditional discharge in 1613-2 may not be convicted, as that law, or as the word convicted has been understood by courts in Georgia. This became an issue after the 2022 revision that eliminated those time restrictions because survivors who were convicted and sentenced were eligible for immediate relief after being sentenced, while survivors who were sentenced as first offenders may have had to serve the entirety of their sentence prior to discharge or restriction under those statutes. But if they violated their first offender probation, then they could be adjudicated, convicted, and sentenced, and then might be available for relief. So it provides some kind of weird incentives that I don't believe were the intent. But it did create a discrepancy between survivors who were convicted without either having access or being afforded first offender status, and those who were sentenced as first offenders because they had no prior criminal history and were otherwise eligible, and the courts decided that they met the criteria and should be treated as first offenders. So that's something that may be looked at in the coming legislative session. And just to kind of give you some general thoughts from the ground, as somebody who is practicing in this area and assisting survivors who are going through this process. Like I said, the GBI does provide the GCIC reports that can be filed with the petitions at no cost per the statute. So taking advantage of that makes this really accessible for survivors. I also have come into some confusion about the sealing process when these petitions are the statute requires that these petitions for vacatur or restriction be filed under seal. And the traditional process for filing something under seal involves making a motion and getting a court order that authorizes the clerk's office to file that under seal. So there is some conflict with how that can actually be, how that is being done. That could be looked into, because some of the petitions that I've filed on behalf of clients have included, beyond the sensitive information of just being identified as a survivor of trafficking, have included information related to the identities of their traffickers. So really important that these petitions be filed under seal for both privacy and safety reasons for survivors who are seeking this. Now, we never gone through the process and talked with stakeholders, prosecutors, judges, and clerks. We've been able to work through these issues and make sure that the petitions have been filed sealed, again, because of the sensitive nature that can be included in these petitions, but just something that isn't immediately apparent all the time. So I want to talk a little bit about the impact that the Survivors First Act is having on survivors. So this has been in effect here in Georgia for a couple of years now. It came into effect in 2020, like I said, was revised in 2022. So survivors have been able to access this for the last couple of years. So while it's not a whole lot of time, and I understand that there's some difficulty in getting a lot of information on how many of these petitions may have been filed throughout the state, again, because Georgia has 159 counties with multiple courts, and these petitions are supposed to be filed in the individual sentencing court, which could be a municipal court, could be a state court, a probate court, and obviously a superior court as well. Hard to collate and get access to all that data. But from my experience of representing survivors, I can attest to the impact that this is having. And it is helping those survivors to overcome the barriers that we talked about earlier, the barriers to employment, barriers to education, barriers to housing, barriers to community engagement, barriers in the child welfare system, that the criminal convictions that occurred because these survivors were trafficked had built these walls up. And I think we all understand that when we talk about about trafficking. We also use the word exploitation. And we do that intentionally because the nature of trafficking involves a vulnerability that traffickers are able to exploit in our survivors. And a lot of times those vulnerabilities center around financial needs of survivors or other needs of survivors. What I'm seeing is that the impact this is having is that it is reducing those vulnerabilities and potentially and hopefully reducing the risk that these survivors are re-victimized because they are less vulnerable and have less or potentially less likely to be exploited because they've gained employment that they enjoy. They have more safe, secure housing. They've accessed education, all the things that the lack thereof can make somebody vulnerable to exploitation. This bill and these statutes and petitions can find ways to overcome that for survivors. So I want to talk to you all about a couple of different of our clients. We had one client who was convicted over 40 years ago of solicitation of sodomy that involved a prostitution arrest while they were being trafficked when they were 17 years old. Working with this individual, again, like I said, the first thing we do is we run somebody's criminal history so that we know what's out there, know where to look, because a lot of times people aren't really sure, especially when we're talking about a conviction from over 40 years ago, where they were arrested, what jurisdiction might have done the arrest, what court they might have been prosecuted in. So we did that, and this was their only cycle on their criminal history was a solicitation of sodomy conviction from 40 years ago. So they found out about this new law, approached us, and because they were having an issue, they weren't living in Georgia, they were living out of state, and their grandchildren were in the process of coming into the foster care system. There's a child welfare involvement for some of their much younger relatives. And this conviction was preventing them from being considered as a placement resource for those relatives, which we all know, for those of us who work in the child welfare system, that having these relative resources for placement, keeping kids out of the foster care system, can help, again, protect future victims from creating those vulnerabilities. So we ran into some issues ourselves collecting those records from over 40 years ago. I will say the GCIC personnel that I spoke with when I was trying to find out more information were very helpful in helping to locate some of the pleadings in the case, and eventually this was able to be vacated by consent agreement. And it's my understanding, I spoke with this individual a while ago, and they were successfully able to be considered a placement resource for their relatives. So that was one way that this law has had an impact, not only on their life, but on the life of their relatives. Another client that we had was convicted of criminal offenses that spanned more than 3 counties, multiple courts within those counties, more than 10 years ago while they were being trafficked. This individual actually never sought any sort of formal assistance to escape their victimization. They physically removed themselves very far away and kind of never looked back and started over on their own. So that created, again, when we talked about what is needed in these petitions, the sorts of documentation that can be attached and provided with these petitions, we didn't have any of that because they didn't have any victim service organizations that they had worked with. They didn't have any therapists that they were working with to process some of what they happened. But what they were having were issues with education, employment, and housing. And specifically, this individual had been hired or offered a job through a program that was geared towards recruiting survivors. and helping them overcome some of those barriers. They completed the probationary period. Everybody recommended them for full-time employment. They started working, and then HR kicked it back because of their criminal conviction, and they were not allowed to continue that employment. They had goals of getting continuing their education at a higher level. They had been denied housing apartments because of their criminal conviction, and were having to live and raise their family in a place where they didn't want to be, and they wanted to be somewhere else that they felt was safer and more secure for their family. And so we did an in-depth investigation, collecting decade-old records and using those records to corroborate and tell their story. And again, ultimately, we're able to achieve a consent vacatur of their criminal offenses that occurred while they were being trafficked, again, more than 10 years ago. And again, just like the previous client ran their criminal history, this cluster of criminal arrests and convictions that occurred during their trafficking while they were being trafficked, because they were being trafficked, was the only times they had those sorts of negative run-ins with law enforcement. One practice tip from this, because I had to go back and fix it, is for anybody who's representing or helping survivors on this, is to include the OTNs on your plea, and include those offense tracking numbers underneath the case number. That'll help when you get if there is an order to vacate, let the clerk's office know specifically which cycles on those criminal histories were being vacated, because there were some duplicate entries in this case that we had to go back and fix to correct that. But ultimately, they're able to now continue that education and better provide for themselves and their family, that they had been coming up against a barrier because of their criminal convictions that occurred while they were being trafficked here in Georgia more than 10 years ago. So again, my name is Brian Atkinson. I'm the staff attorney at the Cease Clinic. This is my contact information. I'll also put it in chat, but always available to talk with individuals who are advocating for, representing survivors in these actions, to talk about different ways to do that. So thank you, Erica, for letting me talk today and talk about this. This is a practice area. Again, I joined Cease in 2019. Before this existed, didn't learn about it until after it had come into law, and now something that I think we're really enjoying. I think it's something that our students here at the law school are also really enjoying practicing in, because we're able to, again, see the immediate impact that these vacatur petitions are having on the lives of survivors.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Brian. Thank you to you and your team. I know that you guys have diligently been in this space since this law came to be, and we really appreciate all your efforts. It's exciting for Georgia to be able to move forward in this way. I know that Lindsay Cheatham, our statewide victim advocate here at CJCC, has also done some work, whether that be with you guys or with other survivors that are looking to vacate and kind of learn more about what that is and what that can mean for them. So we're excited for the opportunity to see this legislation continue to evolve and unfold, and hopefully be able to get those survivors this resource that they so desperately need. So thank you so much for spending some time with us today. As you guys can see there on Brian's screen, he still has his contact information up. Please go ahead and take a quick screenshot of that or a picture of that if you need to get in touch with Brian, ask some follow-up questions. We might just ask that you hold on to any questions for just a few moments, as I have just a few more announcements and things to get through. But if you do have something that you would like to follow up with Brian, Brian, if you also don't mind, I'm going to share my screen in just a second. So if you don't mind dropping your contact information into the chat, that would be great, so folks have something to look at and reach you at. I'm going to go ahead and share mine and get back into presentation mode for you guys. Okay. All right. Thank you so much again, Brian. Really appreciate that. Do just want to kind of quickly move on to, I know we have about a little less than half an hour left, and we have some other things that we would like to get through, particularly some admin announcements and updates. So looking at your screen there are the 2024 quarterly meeting dates. We have already outlined that. Those are also available on CJCC's website. And we've updated that as well. So if you would like to take a quick picture of this, you are welcome to do so. And or Lindsay can drop that into the chat so you're able just to kind of copy and paste. As you all know, we typically do not send out those quarterly meeting invites until a few weeks before. So if you would like to go ahead and put it on your calendars, you are welcome to do so. After speaking with management team, it sounds like we are interested in doing next year kind of a hybrid of quarterly meetings, some in person and some virtual. So after kind of thinking through what might be best for folks as far as attendance goes, we're thinking the first and the last meetings of the year will be in person, and then the second and third quarterly meetings will be virtual. So the March date and the December date in person at CJCC offices, downtown Atlanta, and then the June and September date will be in the virtual setting, the same setting that we are familiar with and on now. And of course, we'll kind of talk more about that as we move into the new year, but I did just want to let you guys know that that is what we have already mapped out for quarterly meeting dates. Also, as many of you know, this is a very busy time for myself and for my team when it comes to 2024 task force membership. We have hundreds of applications that we pour over and vet, making sure that folks are placed in the appropriate work group, that they are best utilizing their skills or resources, whether that be on behalf of themselves as an individual and or their organization or agency, and really kind of making sure that we're staying thoughtful about where their skills or resources would be most meaningful on the task force. And then also just vetting for appropriateness. We want to make sure that folks that are requesting or applying to join the task force have the necessary credentials or background to do so. And so as you can imagine, it takes a bit of time, and Lindsay has really kind of been working diligently on that. So thank you to Lindsay for helping me, assisting me with doing that and weeding through some of those applications. That being said, we are in the final stages of vetting those applications. So if you did apply for 2024, you should be hearing from me next week. So we will be sending out the welcome and introduction emails, complete with all of your meeting days and times already mapped out for 2024. So please keep an eye out for that. And I will be sending as well all 12 months of 2024's calendar invites. So as for those of you that this is not your first rodeo and you are familiar with how things work, I will be sending out that really lengthy email, but I promise it is helpful if you read it from start to finish. There's a lot of good information in there, and many of the questions that some of you will have can be answered just kind of by glancing at the email. So please do so. That being said, I also wanted to mention that typically in January, for those of you that are also going to be a returning member, you know that we do spend roughly the first hour or so doing kind of a brief presentation on the history of the task force, who CJCC is, our role with coordinating the task force, some of those specialized projects or initiatives that have had great success, and so forth. Really just to lay that foundation. We found that it's particularly helpful for those new members stepping in that say, okay, I've joined this statewide task force, now what? I really don't know anything about it, or I really just want to learn about its core function or about the history of how it came to be. So instead of spending 10 hours, because that's how long it would be for Alina and I for 10 different meetings in January to go through the same presentation, we thought it would be best to record ourselves. So we do have a video of ourselves recorded that walks through that whole kind of introductory and welcome PowerPoint and presentation that we do for all 9 work groups and management team. So I will be including a link to that recording in the welcome and introduction email that I'll send out next week. So please keep an eye out for that. The expectation is no matter if you are returning or new member, that you do come prepared having already viewed that recording prior to your January meeting. So please, 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 it's in your best interest to take a look at that recording. It's not long, I promise, maybe half an hour at most. But it still does just do a great job of going into a little bit more in depth about the task force as a whole, like I said, who we are, the history of the task force, and then, of course, our core functions and missions and where we hope to move into the new year. So please take a moment to really view that and come ready with questions to your January meeting, whatever work group you are placed in. Another update is we have some donations available, and I'm going to let Lindsay come on and talk just a few minutes about that. She has the opportunity of, I think, receiving some donations and maybe just wants to put a plug out there. So, Lindsay, I'll let you chat about that.
Yeah, thanks, Erica. Hi, everyone. Just like Erica said, wanted to do a quick plug. If yourself or your organization or agency is in need of any comfort items or hygiene items, I had a large donation that I'm trying to disperse throughout the state to different organizations that might need them. So I have lots of different clothing, hygiene, comfort, stuffed animals, items like that to help assist any agency that might be in need of any additional donations. So I will drop my email in the chat. And if you are in need of anything, or if you want to be partnered with someone else that might have some available resources, just let me know and I can help you out with that.
Great. Thanks, Lindsay. And yeah, if you want to drop your chat into, your contact information into the chat, that'd be perfect. And then folks can follow up with you. Also, Carla Harvey, I am just seeing, oh, sorry, guys. I'm looking at checking back in the chat. Rachel asked, will in-person meetings also have a virtual component? The short answer is I don't think so. And the reason for that is that if we do offer the virtual component, there is fear that everybody will just try to join virtual and we will miss the in-person opportunity that typically comes along with networking and really being able to connect with folks and on that face-to-face level. That's not to say that I've totally ruled it out. We'll have to kind of connect with our IT department as well to even see if that's possible. But at this moment, we are thinking of it just being in person for those 2 quarterly meeting dates. That's not to say that it can't be recorded. The meeting can't be recorded and then later sent out just for folks that were unable to sit in person. But we'll talk a little bit more about that as we kind of get into the new year. And then also, Carla Harvey, looking at your chat, wondering if it's too late to apply. It is not. So if you would like to shoot Lindsay an email to the email address that she just dropped in, she has the opportunity to open the portal back up for last minute applications. So if you can get it done maybe within the next day or two, that would be great for us as we are winding down the application process. But we will go ahead and reopen that up, and you can just send Lindsay an email, Carla Harvey, and let her know your contact information and that you are able and ready to go ahead and submit your application in the next couple of days, and we'll get that reopened for you. Okay. Moving on, this is my favorite part of our quarterly meetings is we get to highlight some of those exemplary members that have really stood out over the last year, have gone above and beyond. We wish that we could recognize each and every one of you individually, but we know that, of course, that's just not possible with time. We do want to make sure that you all know how valued and appreciated you are, but we do like to just take a few moments at the end of every year to spotlight a few of the members, like I said, that have just gone above and beyond. And I have asked each of the chairs, the work group chairs, to send me just a quick blurb, a sentence or two about why they feel this individual has really gone above and beyond throughout the last 12 months. So just want to take a few moments to recognize these folks and individuals. So first, Taylor Strickland. Taylor Strickland is representing for Work Group 1. Taylor Strickland is the haven of our choice for Work Group 1's 2023 Member Spotlight. Taylor is a reliable group member and took on the responsibility of updating our training compendium document, upgrading the formatting and appearance of the document, and making it more usable with internal links and an index. She put in a lot of work outside our monthly meetings, and we appreciate her dedication and attention to detail. So thank you so much. That was from Carla and Harold Taylor. So we wanted to make sure that you had the recognition for all the work that you've done. Work Group 2 is Myra Telly. Myra Telly is a dedicated member of Work Group 2 on the task force. She brings innovation, ideas, and a heart full of compassion, is connected to our projects in the work group. Myra not only contributes to our work group, but also participates in Work Group 4. She gives her skills, time, and insight needed to address the complex issue of trafficking, which reflects her unyielding commitment to combating the exploitation of youth. In Work Group 2, Myra plays a pivotal role in developing and implementing strategies to protect youth from exploitation. Her innovation at advocacy for creating relatable, trauma-informed, youth-friendly prevention tools helps us to ensure that we are empowering young folks to recognize the signs of trafficking and stay safe. We are very grateful to have Myra as an active member of Work Group 2. So thank you, Myra, so much for your commitment. Work Group 2 really appreciates you. Work Group 3 recognizes its own chair, so this is a bit of a surprise probably for you, Kayla, but we wanted to recognize Kayla Peoples, who also serves as a chair for Work Group 3. Kayla has consistently gone above and beyond and is the beat behind our small work group. Sometimes there are meetings with just the two of us, and she will go out of her way to try to get the other members to engage. Kayla is very passionate about the mission of our group and is always bringing up new and interesting things that she has come across that we could possibly integrate into projects. I am proud to be her co-chair and couldn't have asked for a better person to manage with. So that is from Nicosia. So thank you, Kayla. We really appreciate all your efforts with Work Group 3. Work Group 4 is also Myra. So Myra, 2 gold stars for you for Work Group 2 and Work Group 4. You are recognized for both. Work Group 4 says that Myra Tully is a valuable asset to our work group. She offers extremely thoughtful guidance and relevant insight. She always jumps in to volunteer when additional help is needed. And as equally as important, her attendance is consistent. So again, thank you, Myra, for your dedication to Work Group 4, in addition to Work Group 2. Work Group 5 recognizes Sue Williams. Susan is a dedicated member to Work Group 5. She's always so intentional during the monthly meetings, providing brilliant insight and connections as we have built out the Work Group 5 response guide. Furthermore, she is always the first to volunteer herself for additional work if ever needed outside of the regularly scheduled time. Thank you, Susan, for all of your hard work this year on pushing the project forward. We truly appreciate your passion and dedication to the task force, as well as everything else you do as a professional. So, Sue, if you're on, thank you so much. We really appreciate you, and your Work Group 5 members echo that sentiment. Amanda Buzzio is represented for Work Group 6. Work Group 6 says, Amanda Buzzio has always been a reliable and extremely valuable member of Work Group 6. Her consistent presence, innovative ideas, and incredible expertise has aided tremendously over the last year. She is also quick to provide external resources to our project development and is always looking for ways to bridge the gaps, avoid duplication, and encourage collaboration. Thank you, Amanda, for all of your hard work, dedication, and passion, not only to Work Group 6, but also in being part of the state's anti-trafficking response. You are a rock star. So thank you, Amanda. Work Group 6 is very appreciative of all your efforts. Work Group 7 recognizes Peggy Remy, and I actually think, unfortunately, Peggy had to step off, so I hope that she's able to see this a little bit later through the recording. But Work Group 7 wanted to recognize Peggy. Peggy is committed to survivor-centered service and has helped our work group solidify our why for our group while offering invaluable contributions to Work Group 7's projects. So thank you, Peggy. I hope you're able to see this a little bit later. Work Group 8 wants to recognize Sarah Crossman Sullivan. Sarah is a valuable member to Work Group 8. She personifies dedication, commitment, and passion for this work. She has provided countless donations to the youth in the form of goodie bags and is always available for anything that is asked. In addition to the donations, she has volunteered her time with the youth by sharing her wisdom, knowledge, and effervescent spirit during various workshops. Sarah, you're awesome and you rock. So thank you, Sarah. If you're on, Work Group 8 thanks you. And then also another surprise for Hillary, one of our own chairs. The other chair, Dr. Margie Gill, wanted to thank you, Hillary. So I hope you're able to see this a little bit later. Hillary is a wealth of information when it comes to advocating for survivors. Her willingness to lead and share her knowledge are only 2 of many character traits that make her shine. She is determined, dependable, and committed to improving the quality of life for others. So thank you guys so much. Like I said, I wish that we could really highlight and spotlight each and every one of you, but we do want to always make sure that we're trying to give a little bit of visibility and kind of incentivize folks, of course, in hopes that we will be able to spotlight you next year and or in the years to come. So if you have a work group member that was spotlighted today, please drop it in the chat and congratulate them and thank them for a job well done. We're always excited to spotlight these folks. And last but not least, I do want to just take a couple of moments to also spotlight a dear friend and a dear colleague. And Jordan knows that this is coming, so this is not too much of a surprise. But for those of you that have had the wonderful opportunity of knowing Dr. Jordan Greenbaum, you know that she is actually stepping down and retiring, or so she says. Jordan, if you ever change your mind, please feel free. That the task force at the application is always open for you. You know that. But I do just want to take a couple of moments and speak a few words about Dr. Greenbaum and what she means to us. So, for those of you that have had the pleasure of knowing and working alongside Dr. Jordan Greenbaum, you know that there are not enough words to express what she means to the field of anti-trafficking work. With Dr. Greenbaum officially retiring from the field, we want to ensure she knew just what she meant to us and how thankful we are to have had the opportunity to join her during her incredibly impressive tenure. Dr. Greenbaum has touched so many hearts and souls, many of which she will likely never know. She has been a titan in this field and a true pioneer, leading and guiding us all throughout the way. Dr. Greenbaum, thank you so much for your work on the statewide human trafficking task force for all these years and all the other various efforts that you have been part of. We value you more than you know and truly hope that retirement treats you well. So best of luck, Dr. Greenbaum. Thank you so much. I know that it's a sad day for us all to say goodbye, but it's a much, much earned and well-deserved retirement. So if you ever are feeling like you're just bored and want to step back in and have something to do, please know the invitation is always open. Our doors are always open. But truly, from the bottom of our hearts, CJCC thanks you. And I know that many, many others do as well. So for those of you that have had the opportunity to work with Dr. Greenbaum, please make her feel so loved in the chat. I know that she has really been part of many of our lives in very different ways, but impactful ways. So thank you, Dr. Greenbaum.
Thank you so very much for your extremely kind words. It's very moving. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you. All right. And then last but not least, guys, just want to, of course, recognize all of our other partners that maybe were not mentioned here today, whether that be through various efforts, projects, and or through Member Spotlight. So many of you will see your seals or logos listed here. And then, of course, we always get excited to add new slides with new logos and seals with each and every meeting. For those of you that reach out and say, hey, I didn't see my seal or I didn't see my logo. So if you do not recognize your seal today, please, of course, know that you're always welcome to shoot it over to us and we will add it to the slides. But I think that is pretty much it for me, guys. Thank you again all so much. I'm letting you go with 8 minutes back in your day. So instead of running over, we're cutting it short. There's my contact information as well as Alina. And like I said, as many of you know, Alina really is my right-hand woman when it comes to all things task force, and she kind of handles a lot of the day-to-day. So you will either be in contact with she or I, but you're free to reach out to either one of us. She will be back in a couple of weeks and hopefully able to kind of help with some of the questions that you all might have as we quickly move into 2024. So I just wanted to kind of end it there and thank you all so much. Have a wonderful and happy holiday season. We really thank you all from the bottom of our hearts for each and everything that you do, no matter if it's pertaining to the statewide task force or your respective disciplines and your typical 9-to-5s. I know that many of us do not have typical 9-to-5s, and the reach of everything that you do goes far and above. So just thank you again, guys. I hope you all have a wonderful holiday season. Please reach out with any questions that you might have, and we look forward to seeing you in the new year. So thank you, all. Take care.